Inflation sure is staying consistent, and we have some pretty surprising retail sales numbers to cover here this week. My name is Brandon Steele, financial advisor with Mainsail Financial Group here in Bellevue. And our goal every Thursday is to bring to you the market news, the data, the trends that we're watching, hopefully weed out a little bit of the noise along the way. I want to give you a heads up that although we have some really important stuff to cover, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter session this week. We're going to skip the question of the week again, and I apologize, but we do have a webinar this evening. So we will come back to this next week. But all that to say that we do have a very important few things to cover, which are really around inflation and retail sales. So this week we had CPI, Consumer Price Index, and PPI, Producer Price Index, come out, which of course are measurements of inflation. And the CPI number came out showing that we were up 0.3% on both core and the headline number. So, I think depending on where you looked, this was about in line with expectations. However, I would share that I think a lot of folks secretly kind of believed it might come in a little bit lower, or maybe were betting that it might come in a little bit lower than a lot of those expectations might have suggested. Given that we've seen this higher inflation all year in 2024 versus where things were kind of starting to trend towards late 2023. So this was actually, again, depending on where you looked, but in general, it was in line with expectations. But I do think that it did take the market by a little bit of a surprise. And I think the biggest thing here is that it is showing inflation is consistent and is maybe persistent might be a better word, because this certainly is nowhere near the 2% annual target that the Fed is looking for as we kind of project ahead here. So this is the fourth month now of inflation data that has been quite a bit higher than that target, and again certainly shows that even keeping rates where they are right now is having a bit of a delayed effect. We'll see if it impacts inflation moving forward, but certainly proves that this last bit is sticky in terms of getting inflation down. The other thing to highlight on the inflation topic is producer price index. And this was actually quite a bit of a surprise to the upside. So producer price index, or PPI, came out up 0.5% for the month of April. And this was a big surprise versus the 0.3% that the market had kind of expected. And even the core PPI number was quite a bit higher than expectations as well. So again, general theme here is, like we've been sharing, inflation is much more persistent than I think, the Fed or markets or a lot may believe, and it's going to be really tricky to get this down to that 2% target. On top of this, which could have an impact on inflation to kind of, marry all this together, but we had retail sales come out this week as well. And it was another very important data point, as we saw retail sales were basically flat for the month of April versus some really high numbers compared to or around what we've been seeing lately. So far in 2024, these retail sales numbers have just been gigantic. And this time, again here in April, retail sales came out about flat. And the expectation was that we would see an increase of about 0.4%. So obviously, not just the fact that it's come down from the prior readings, but it was also a significant surprise compared to what many analysts had been expecting coming into the data point here earlier this week. So I think if I'm going to kind of wrap this into a nutshell, what I'll share is that obviously inflation is persistent. We've been covering that for a long time, and this certainly continues to prove that fact. But the other thing that I'll highlight is that, with these retail sales numbers, maybe there are some more cracks in the consumer and in the jobs market really starting to show and kind of, poke their head up a little bit. Now, whether that continues or not, we'll see, right? Maybe this is a sign, but nonetheless, it is something really important to watch. And especially if you go back to some of the Fed comments recently, maybe there's something they were looking at within the data points that suggest that jobs and the consumer are beginning to slow. So we will see, and we'll certainly keep you posted as time goes on, but definitely, a key factor to watch here moving forward. And it could also impact inflation, because if we're all spending less, obviously inflation can begin to subside to some degree as well. So coming up next week, it is a little bit of a slower week in terms of data, but we will cover the Fed minutes come out on Wednesday. So we'll cover anything that, kind of is important or noteworthy within there. And then we also will get back to our question of the week here this week, I promise. So definitely tune in next Thursday at 3 and we'll get back to our question here. In the meantime, have a great upcoming weekend and we'll see you next Thursday at 3.